You gonna be my friend or my foe?
Hello, all of you vaingloriously wonderful people. You might not know it from watching videos on my channel, but I am a huge nerd for games in the Civilization franchise. If you want to skip past this backstory intro, check out the chapter markers below. But I have sunk thousands of hours into the various Civ games over the past quarter of a century, and I've played them all. While Civ 3 was where I started, I've spent some time going back to Civ 1 and 2, and I've even played Civ Revolutions and Beyond Earth, and I actually enjoyed them. The Civ series to me is like digital crack. I simply cannot get enough, and I frequently make poor life choices in order to support my addiction. So when Civ 7 was announced, I was ecstatic. I enjoyed Civ 6, which I know isn't exactly a popular opinion, but I was ready for something new. As dev diaries began trickling out, I saw some things I was interested in, but also some that worried me. But since I have thoroughly enjoyed every Civ game leading up to 7, I figured it would be safe to assume I'd love this one too. So I plonked down $140 for the pre-order of the Founders Edition and began playing as soon as the advanced access period began. Man, have I ever been disappointed. This is not a review per se, more just my opinions on items I feel are shortcomings, ranging from mild to severe. Though, if I'm being honest, if you're on the fence about buying the game, I think you should probably give it several months, if not a year or two. Keep watching to find out why I feel that way. I've put about 65 hours into the game so far. To be honest, I have not really enjoyed it. I keep playing through different games with different leaders and different civilizations to try to find something enjoyable, something that resembles what brought me back to Civ games with each entry into the franchise. Right now though, this just isn't Civ. It is a 4X game, sure, but it is missing so much that allowed previous Civ games to emerge as the victor in the genre and ultimately stand the test of time. So I want to talk about my experience so far, highlighting some of the worst features of the game, and talk about some ways I think each of those items can be improved. If you are having a great time with Civ 7, I am truly, without any sarcasm or irony, I am truly happy for you. Not every game is going to land the same with every gamer, so everything I talk about today is my opinion. It's okay if you think or feel differently about the game. If there is something I mentioned today that maybe you disagree with, or think I have overlooked an aspect of the game that is preventing me from enjoying it, then please leave a constructive comment. Starting out a new game is fine. I still think it's weird that you can play as any leader with any Civ, but whatever, I was never into the franchise for historical accuracy. So yeah, it looks great, it sounds great, and then you get in and see how limited things are. The map sizes are a joke, and there aren't many variations to choose from. You can jump into advanced options, which in previous iterations let you customize your game in a myriad of ways. But the choices in Civ 7 are incredibly limited in comparison, which is incredibly disappointing. I really enjoyed creating highly customized configurations in past entries of the franchise, and I would really love to see the multitude of options that those previous Civ games had available.
A new banner unfurls, emblazoned with triumphal laurels. Rome seeks its champions.
But let's move beyond that and into a game. I'm playing as Lafayette of the Roman Empire because, why not? We'll get our capital city founded, get a scout produced, and then end our first turn. And that gives us the first thing to talk about, this tech tree. This is pretty much the core of what happens in a Civ game, and you'll find yourself interacting with it quite a bit, even if not by choice. First up, you cannot select multiple techs to queue them up, or even click on an end goal and let the game map it out. Previous iterations of Civ allowed this. If you wanted to fast track to an information age tech, you could click that one single tech and the game would just map out a progression through all of the prerequisite techs. But in Civ 7, each time you complete research on a tech, you have to select a new one. You cannot queue them up at all, which means you may wind up spending a lot more time in the tech tree than you'd like. At launch, the tech tree was just a visual mess. There have been a couple of updates to the game at the time I'm recording this video, and it has improved somewhat. This happened in previous Civ games too. At launch, the tech tree was just all smushed together and was difficult to decipher. Moving the techs apart from one another smooths most of that out, but it still isn't there in 7. I mean, look at this line connecting this tech. What is happening here? It looks unfinished and not at all in place in such a storied franchise as Civilization. Due to a major shift in how Civ games are played, you also cannot race far ahead in the tech tree to get nukes and a giant death robot, while everyone else still has some trebuchets and guys on horses with pointy sticks. I'll talk more about the eras later, but I already missed the occasional game where I just blindly focus on science until I hit the information age around 200 BC and then just stomped everyone else on the map out of existence. Civ 7 has some design choices that make that impossible because in each era, I get stopped at future tech no matter how much science I am producing. Sure, researching future tech gives me a boost on some early techs in the next era, but I feel breaking it down this way has really limited the number of ways you can choose to play the game. The civics tree is much the same. Like the tech tree, you cannot queue up your studies into civics. But worse, there's more than one civics tree to worry with. You get the main one for the era, one tailored to the civ you're playing, one for religion, one for your ideology. It is just too much.
If I can't change your heart, I suppose I'm gonna have to take you out of the way.
So we've dealt with the tech and civic trees. Let's get a settler and start a new city. No, strike that. I mean, let's start a new town. When Civ 7 was announced, this was an idea I was originally behind. I liked the idea of small, rural areas that contributed to the overall advancement of your Civ without needing constant attention. I was interested in the idea of each one having a specialization to bolster your Civ overall. But in practice, it is not well executed. Towns cannot build anything. All building improvements and units must be purchased with gold. Again, I thought this sounded interesting when it was presented before launch, but now that the game is out, I don't like it. Now I have to decide if I'm going to save up my gold to buy a few more units to go deal with a pesky warmongering neighbor, or pick up a granary for a small town. I know it's a game, but towns in real life usually find local funding to build their own damn granary, so the national government can do things like pay soldiers and buy bullets. If choosing a specialization for a town had a significant impact upon the treasury or some other aspect of my Civ, sure, I could get behind it. I've played around with the various specializations, ensuring I had necessary improvements to maximize the benefits that come with a specific specialization, but the bonuses are negligible at best. With about 65 hours in the game, I've already started ignoring town specialization because its impact is so insignificant. That is a massive wasted opportunity. If you're going to add a revolutionary new gameplay mechanic to a beloved franchise, especially one that is respected for a history of attention to detail, you should really implement that new mechanic as something more than novel or a token change for the sake of change. Worse yet, a town will continue to grow in population, sometimes even eclipsing the population of your capital. Yet it is still a town because you haven't forked over even more gold to convert it into a city. I think towns should automatically convert to a city once they reach a certain population threshold. You can't specialize a town until it reaches a specific population. I think it's a population of 7. So a natural progression from town to city would make sense around a population of 12 to 14. And all of this could be presented with a choice. When a town reaches the specialization threshold, you don't have to pick a specialization if you don't want to. Granted, the game will become a bit obnoxious with reminders that you can specialize, but you can ignore it. The same could happen with converting from a town into a city automatically. The game could give you the option. Hey, Boston over there now has a dozen population. Would you like to convert it to a city? You could choose to convert it to a city right then, or come back to it again when you're ready. The problem with converting a town to a city with gold is compounded by the non-stop disasters. Rarely a turn goes by that I am not notified of some natural disaster occurring in some part of the world. Want to build a city by a river for the bonuses and strategic location? Well, you better be prepared for a flood every 10 turns that takes out 3 or more improvements. If this happens in a town, your only choice is to spend even more gold to repair those improvements. You know, the improvements that already cost a ton of gold to build in the first place. A town can't produce anything, so you have no build queue to conduct repairs. You just get to spend gold. Even when turned down to their weakest impact, the occurrence of natural disasters is simply way too frequent. For the first time ever in nearly 3 decades of playing Civ games, I recently rage quit a game and then deleted the save from my PC because of disasters. Quite literally, every other turn had a major flood in my capital. I founded my capital a couple of tiles to the east of where the founder spawned in turn 1, just to get a bit closer to the coast. From the founder menu, there is no warning of flood risk like there is for settlers. I made it about 40 turns in before I was so angry from the flooding that I just quit the desktop and didn't touch the game for 2 more days. The disaster frequency needs to be scaled way back, and like many things missing from the game customization menu, it needs to be an option you can turn off entirely if you desire. But enough about disasters, let's talk a bit more about towns and cities. I would like the choice of founding a town or a city. Maybe add in a second founder civilian unit to form cities and let the settlers create towns. Because sometimes I need to start a city in a strategic location, but it is far enough from my other cities that I cannot reasonably split my troops and keep everything defended. So I either have to let that strategic location get claimed by someone else, or I have to bankrupt my Civ to upgrade that new town into a city so it can begin producing units and buildings immediately. If I had a choice based upon what type of civilian unit I send out, this problem would be solved. I would gladly wait a few more turns to create a founder instead of a settler if it meant I had more choice as a player.
You think this ends things? You think that casting out one broken down woman makes you a hero in the eyes of God and history?
So I have some cities and towns, things are going well, but then suddenly I'm notified that the age is ending soon and a crisis has begun. To be honest, the crisis system kinda pisses me off. I'm fine with some random encounters that present a challenge to overcome now and then, but the crisis system just isn't it. Again, we're dealing with a system that just feels incredibly underdeveloped. These could have been really cool elements that felt like a natural progression to things. Instead, they just feel like arbitrary events that exist solely as an excuse for another new feature that I really dislike that we'll talk about in a moment. In a plague crisis, you move your units out of the city so they don't die, train or pay for a physician, then send them over to wipe out the plague and things are all better. It takes a few turns, by which time other cities now have the plague, and so you just get to ignore everything else and deal with the plague until the era comes to an end. An invasion means you have to stop what you were doing and build a bunch of units to deal with pesky invaders. And a revolt means plop down in the alternative villa and you can ride this one out because its effects are fairly mild. There is no intrinsically enjoyable gameplay in the crisis system. It is just busy work that seems to exist solely to justify the end of an era. At least you can turn these off in the advanced options menu when starting a new game.
One hemisphere was their past, the other their future. Spain sees both to control the fate of all.
Of course, the crisis system is a painfully obvious and, in my opinion, incredibly lazy reason to transition to a new era. Once again, when I first heard about the idea of eras in Civ 7, I was intrigued. I wasn't really excited about it, but I was at least interested to see how it would play out. To be honest, I think eras are the single biggest miss of Civ 7's new features. To put it bluntly, I do not enjoy them whatsoever, and each time I start up a new game, I find myself less and less motivated to keep playing because I feel like very little that I do in my first two eras really matters all that much. At its core, it's an okay idea, but I feel it should be optional. Maybe this would only be possible on PC, but I would like to see a continuous mode brought to the game. I pick my leader, I pick my civ, and I get the full tech tree, the full civic tree, and then I play that leader and that civ until victory or defeat. I know game devs love to collect data and try to read the data they gather to understand why players do and do not engage with a game. But please, they may as well be reading tea leaves for all the good data-driven game design has done. Time and time again, I see data-driven decisions making games worse and worse and worse. And while this is pure speculation, I have a hunch that is what has happened to Civ 7 and its introduction of eras. The devs saw people dropping out around common points in the game and decided that meant they needed to break things into smaller bits and do a hard reset on civs to keep people interested. I don't know, it may work for some people, but I absolutely hate it. I'd really like to see this become an optional thing, though I doubt that is even possible at this point, given how baked in the eras are.
Just as the rain breaks through an ill-thatched house, so passion penetrates an undeveloped mind.
Before I get to the final thing that really irks me about Civ 7, I want to go through a rapid-fire list of topics and talk about some of the other changes. I'm torn about the removal of workers. I liked planning out my roads instead of having them created automatically. At the same time, I like that selecting a resource can improve it while also expanding my civ's cultural borders. So overall, the removal of workers is a net zero proposition for me. I cannot quite figure out why scouts can no longer explore automatically, and the same goes for early naval units. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, this functionality has been present in Civ's games for as long as I can recall. But now, you will find yourself interacting with scouts quite a bit as you guide them around the map. I do like the scouts lookout and search functions, but these in no way make up for the loss of simply instructing them to automatically scout around. Going hand in hand with managing units, remember how every Civ game since the dawn of time has had a nice menu to manage your units? You could click on each one to locate them and even perform upgrades as newer units became available. In many cases, you were even able to use that list to assign promotions when a unit earned enough XP for one. But in Civ 7, there is a list of units, but it's just that, a list. You can't open it up to view individual units to find them, you can't perform any promotions or upgrades. It is just a list of what exists, and that is fairly useless. I generally dislike the reputation system as a means for dealing with other civs. I don't mind it being a part of working with the independent civs, but it mostly feels like the other main civs are constantly bombarding you with endeavors that often leave you with little choice but to squander your influence instead of using it strategically. It's bad enough that it can drain away your influence, but man, the AI civs are just way too chatty. Like, seriously, Harriet Tubman. Love you, but get out of my face. I just spoke to you last turn. This system desperately needs a rework. Worse, once Espionage enters the picture, you can apparently only have one counter-spy instance running at a time for your entire Civ. So if you think one Civ is spying on you, you can engage in some counter-spying, but that leaves you open to espionage from all the other Civs. And rest assured, they will be taking advantage of this, stealing your tech, sabotaging your plans, and being a general pain in the ass. And there will be nothing you can do about it because someone decided that it was a good idea to limit how many other civs you can engage in counter-spying espionage. And speaking of interacting with other civs, this is a small nitpick, but I dislike how my leader and the other leader are looking toward one another. I feel like I am simply observing an exchange instead of taking part in it. The way leaders in previous versions of Civ looked out toward you, the player, made you feel more like they were speaking to you, creating a greater sense of immersion. I also dislike the frequency of the narrative events. While I appreciate that they are trying to tell a bit of a story, they are repetitive. I'm fairly certain I have seen them all already, and now I'm just tired of them popping up all the time. I do like how goody huts have their own aspect of being a narrative event, however, giving me a choice of rewards for claiming them. But some of these narrative events pop up as a quest, which is okay in and of itself, but there are some, like this one to build radio stations within 20 turns, that are outright impossible to fulfill sometimes. I doubt I can unlock the radio tech in 20 turns, and I can't build radio stations until that tech is unlocked. I know that quest is triggered from completing the first of 3 democracy civics, so I am the one that triggered it. But there is absolutely nothing in that democracy civic to indicate a quest will begin upon completion. So sure, now that I know it happens, I can delay studying that particular civic. But for someone playing the first time or two through, they may have no idea why the quest appeared. Instead, they'll just be frustrated that there is nothing they can do to complete it. It is just a ton of these little things, items that show the small details were overlooked, and that simply does not feel on par with previous Civ games. I'm not really sure how I feel about Barbarians and city-states merging into one entity. I appreciate that you can befriend them over time through influence, but if you are unlucky enough to have several hostile independents nearby, you're going to slog through trying to navigate around them with your scouts, and you will find that they are always marching into your lands trying to capture your cities. They can be quite aggressive as well. I have one save where, when I reached the exploration era, the distant lands only held one solitary independent. All throughout antiquity, I received notification of unmet civs meeting their demise. I have no idea if they took each other out with that one would-be city-state picking off the sole survivor or what, but it was still a bit shocking to see. I also really miss map tacks. Previously, you could add a handy tack to the map to help you mark wonders, goody huts, or even good locations for a future city. I know they were present in Civ 6, but I feel like they were around before that as well. Maybe I was just using mods that made them possible, but I know that they were incredibly helpful. Map tacks need to return immediately because the game feels incomplete without them. Wars also feel a bit weak, even on higher difficulties. Granted, the AI of the civs has never been the greatest when it comes to military strategy and placement of units. They can have a huge army, but absolutely no idea how to use it properly to defend their lands or go on the offensive. I found I can leave a unit or two in my cities and towns, and then sneak an army commander up to a city I want to conquer. The civ I'm at war with will have sent nearly every unit they own toward one low-value town of mine, leaving the rest of their settlements completely unprotected. I am almost always free to simply walk in, occupy a few districts, and then take over fairly easily. That said, I do like the compromise the army commanders provide. Some people missed the stacks of doom for military units while others hated them. The army commander allows you to stack up to 6 units into one tile and transport them all through one movement command. You can even get some cool attack bonuses when those units are stacked. I do wish individual units still gain their own upgrades through experience instead of just the army commander. Sometimes it's tough to keep that army commander in a central location so that all units are near enough to benefit from their buffs.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Everything that I have talked about so far is enough to chill my desire to play Civ 7 more and more with each passing day. But the one thing that really gets under my skin, the one thing I simply cannot fathom how it is missing from the game, The one thing that is the defining hallmark of previous Civ games that is missing from this one. One more turn. How in the hell do you release a Civ game that has a definitive hard ending? The one more turn thing isn't just a meme. It is one of the defining characteristics of the franchise. And yet, in Civ 7, it just is not there. When you reach the victory screen, you have one option: exit to main menu. Are there really people who played Civ games, got to a victory, and did not click the one more turn option and then just mess around in their Civ for a few hundred more turns? This feature needs to be introduced to Civ 7 immediately. I truly cannot grasp how anyone developing the game thought it would be a good idea to jettison it. All of the things that annoy me about Civ 7 do lead me to wonder about something. How much of the game is the way it is because the game was planned for a simultaneous release on PC and console? I hate to jump on the consoles or ruining PC games bandwagon, but there is some truth to it. If a game has to be designed to run on a freaking Nintendo Switch, there are compromises that must be made to enable that. And guess which players suffer the most in those compromises? PC players. Civ 7 doesn't feel so much streamlined as it feels like it is just feature poor. And I have a suspicion that is because many of the features and systems of Civ that we have enjoyed to date would bring a console to its knees. I've been gaming on consoles pretty much since they existed, and there hasn't really been a single one that I didn't own, or had a friend who owned one and I could play on theirs. I am not a console hater, but I made the switch to PC gaming to enjoy games that can take advantage of more powerful hardware. And one of the games that really solidified that change for me was Civ 3. Up until now, Civ has primarily been a PC game. Yeah, there have been console ports and even a couple of games designed specifically for console. I own Civilization Revolution for my Xbox 360 and I love it. Sure, it isn't as fully fleshed out as other Civ games, but that's okay. It's a console game. It plays like a console game, and I really loved playing it. But when I play Civ on a PC, I don't want to feel as though I'm missing features and complexity simply because the game had to be scaled back enough that it could run on a Nintendo Switch. This has been one hell of a bummer of a video to make. It's bad enough that Civ 7 is such an overwhelmingly disappointing follow-up to the franchise I have spent more hours playing than any other. I love and adore Civ games. But this Civ release follows on the heels of two other games I loved, City Skylines and Planet Coaster, absolutely botching their follow-ups as well. It's been a bad year or so for game franchises. At this rate, I fully expect that Grand Theft Auto 6, the next entry in another series I love, will be so bad that I won't even finish it. But I guess if I have to find something positive, it is this. Most of the things that I really dislike about Civ 7 can be fixed. It will take some time and some effort, but they can be fixed. I suppose now we get to wait and see if Firaxis lets Civilization VII become yet another in a long list of recent games that have ruined a franchise, or if they have the determination to correct its course so that the game will stand the test of time. And with that, until next time, I'm Brandon, reminding you to stay vainglorious.